going to be covering John chapter 7. Actually, John chapter 7 and chapter 8 are a pair. They go together, and reading them as separate chapters, you're going to miss some things. And so there are quite a few things that are going to be mentioned in chapter 7 that need to be kept in mind for chapter 8 so that you really see the whole thing as one chapter. I'm not going to do that because it's going to be kind of long, but I want you to keep that in mind, okay, because we're creating a setting that is going to be relevant in the next chapter, okay, so just keep that in mind. In John chapter 7, we're going to introduce the topic of family disputes. Jesus was a source of family contention. There were conflicts within his own family because of him, and there were conflicts within the family of Israel because of him. And those are both going to be brought out in this particular chapter. Family disputes can be very severe. One of the worst cases in my clinical experience that I saw was from, probably going back about 15 years. I remember a woman that I treated who, I went to her, it was like an assisted living facility. So she was technically supposed to be able to care for herself, but she was pretty far gone. There was a little bit of dementia there, well, more than a little bit of dementia there. Anyway, she was very paranoid, and she believed that people were moving things around in her apartment. She blamed all of the woes that fell on her. She blamed her sister. Now, we're talking about a 90, I don't know, I think she was in her 70s. 70-some-year-old woman, okay? And I'll call her Janice. And the more I talked to her, the more it became clear that she was obsessed with her older sister, Cindy. She believed that all of her problems were Cindy's fault. And so I asked, well, how can that be? Cindy lives far away from you. How can Cindy be causing all of your problems to this day? And she basically explained that when she was 4 and Cindy was 5, they were sleeping in the same bed, living with their parents, obviously, and Cindy wet the bed. Well, the next morning, Cindy told her parents that it was Janice that wet the bed. And Janice was shocked and dismayed by this, and she insisted, no, my older sister has lied on me, and the parents believed the older sister. It wasn't a big deal. She wasn't punished or anything, but she never forgot that, and she never forgave her sister for this deception. And every time something bad would happen, she would go back to this particular incident. This is where Cindy turned my parents against me. This is where my life started to go badly. Now, I met Cindy later on, and she insisted that she had apologized over and over for that situation that happened when they were 5. The whole family was aware of it. They thought that Janice was insane for bringing this up, 50 years later, more than 50 years later. But there it was. She hated her sister for this one event. That was one of the worst cases. I wouldn't even call that sibling rivalry, but sibling hatred, okay? Now, Jesus' siblings had issues with him. Maybe not quite on this level, and certainly not for wetting the bed, but there were issues. Now, some might be asking, wait a minute, Jesus didn't have siblings, did he? Actually, he did. When Jesus had finished telling these stories, he left that part of the country. He returned to Nazareth, his hometown. When he taught there in the synagogue, everyone was astonished and said, where does he get his wisdom and his miracles? Now, keep in mind, that was the other thing that impressed people about Jesus. It wasn't just the fact that he could heal anybody that came to him. It was also about the way he spoke. This guy was less than 35 years old, and he spoke like a scholar when it came to the scriptures, when it came to understanding Mosaic law and what we call the Old Testament. He spoke like a scholar, and people were like, where did you go to school? Where are your degrees? He's a carpenter. He didn't go to graduate school. And that was another thing that impressed people. This is a theme that's going to be brought up a number of times. Okay, it's important to keep that in mind. All right, he's just a carpenter's son, and we know Mary, his mother, and his brothers, James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas. All his sisters live right here among us. What makes him so great? And they were deeply offended and refused to believe in him. Now, what did you just read there? Jesus had like 4 brothers and multiple sisters, at least 2. So Jesus has at least 6 siblings. What that tells us is that Mary didn't stay no virgin, okay? So her and Joseph seems like they got busy and produced some other children after the birth of Jesus. And Jesus told them, a prophet is honored everywhere except in his own hometown and among his own family. And that is certainly going to be borne out in today's chapter. Here we see Jesus' lineage. He would be the oldest brother, and James, Joseph, Judas, and Simon, his brothers, with multiple sisters there as well. Think about that. You think, how would you like to be Jesus' younger brother, or one of his younger brothers? Do you think there might be a little bit of favoritism going on? I mean, think about it. Mary appeared, or the angel appeared to Mary, told her that Jesus is going to be the Messiah, told him that this is going to be the Savior of the world. He's going to save his people from their sins, all that. And then you have a kid that, as far as we know, committed no sins. Okay, just the Bible says he committed no sins. So you have Mr. Right as your brother, Mr. Always Right. And, you know, you think about it, that could lead to some potential sibling conflicts. My big brother is the Lord Almighty. Yahoo! I am so honored. If my big brother gets to be king of the universe, what do I get to be? And you see, if Jesus were a king of a kingdom, a king of a territory, then as his brothers, they would at least have prince status. But they didn't get anything. There was only, Messiah was a one-time thing. There was no Messiah's brothers. There was no helper out. It wasn't like Moses. We had Aaron and Miriam as his sisters, so where they actually helped in the governance. So being Savior of the world, it's a one-person. What's a one-person show? And so they kind of realized that. It's like, wow, you're claiming to be that guy, and there's nothing in it for us. I hear that my big brother has been healing every sick person that came to him, and yet he let our father die. Notice in that passage in Matthew that there's no message of Joseph. Okay? In fact, after the Nativity, you really don't hear very much. Well, the Nativity, and then when they fled to Egypt, okay, and then came back. Next time you see is Jesus when he's 12 years old, and both of his parents were alive when he was preaching in the temple. After the age of 12, however, there is no more mention of Joseph. The assumption is Joseph has passed on. And so a potential source of contention is, whoa, Jesus, you're healing everybody. You had this power, and yet Dad died. What was up with that? Why didn't you do something? Why didn't you say something back when we needed you? Not saying I know for sure that was a source of conflict, but if it were my family and I suddenly started doing stuff like that, I'm sure that somebody in the family would bring this up. Hey, what about Grandpa? What about Dad? What about, you could have did something and they got sick and died, and here you had all this power. So let's start John chapter 7. Here we go. Later, Jesus was going about his business in Galilee. Now I want to stop right there real quick. The other Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, were already out by the time John wrote his particular Gospel. John, being aware of what his comrades had already written, has decided not to go in and regurgitate stuff that everybody already knows. And so he just summarizes the majority of what is written in those other Gospels in one sentence. Later, Jesus was going about his business in Galilee. What was going about his business? Doing that stuff mentioned in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Now, what's going on here? When it comes to the behaviors, the healings, and the miracles that Jesus did, John kind of focuses in on the big stuff. He focuses in on Jesus' interactions with Jerusalem. Okay, and that's something to keep in mind. When you see Jesus interacting with people, it usually has something to do with Jerusalem, because his activities in Jerusalem are ultimately what lead to his death and his crucifixion and death. Okay, and so John kind of focuses on all of the interactions that led up to that. And so first of all, in the earlier chapters, he's talking about his earlier visits to Jerusalem, and he heals this guy on the Sabbath, and they want to kill him. There is a death sentence hanging over Jesus' head for doing that. So he avoids Jerusalem. So let me go on. He didn't want to travel in Judea because the Jews there were looking for a chance to kill him. In case you questioned what I just said, there's your Bible verse to support it. It was near the time of Tabernacles, a feast observed annually by the Jews. Now, what is the Feast of Tabernacles? It's a celebration of how God preserved the Israelites when they were going through the desert. They were in the desert for 40 years. Now, if you're going to be in the desert for 40 years, what are some things that are going to be issues? Well, not a lot of food in the desert. If you like eating rattlesnakes and lizards, okay. Spiders, you're in business. But if you like water and things other than grubby animals that are kind of unclean from a Jewish perspective, then there's not a whole lot to eat or drink out there in the desert. And what did God do? He miraculously fed them for 40 years. So how did he give them water? A rock. Okay, there was a rock, and water squirted out of it. God caused that particular miracle, so they had water, in spite of the fact that they're in a desert. And where did food come from? Manna. He caused birds to come down so they could eat bird meat, and then the manna provided them with carbohydrates and vitamins and everything, and so they were supported for 40 years. And so the Feast of Tabernacle wasn't a worship place. A tabernacle, another word is tent or temporary dwelling place. And so it was a celebration of when they lived in tents while they were wandering around the desert for 40 years, and God provided for them. So it's important to keep that in mind. And when is the Feast of Tabernacles? Okay, Feast of Tabernacles is October. Okay, it bounces around depending on which particular date, but usually October. That's when it happens. Okay. Now, this event that we're talking about is the October of the year before he died. If we assume that Jesus was crucified in like April 33 AD, then this was October 32 AD, just a few months before he was crucified in Jerusalem. So this is where we're at on the timeline. So another word for the Feast of Tabernacles was Sukkot. Okay, that's one way of pronouncing it. The Yiddish pronunciation is Sukkot. So that was the holiday that everybody was celebrating here. And they had to go to Jerusalem to do this celebration. So, family's ready to go for this annual festival that takes place in Jerusalem every year. And the family goes, the head of the family goes with the rest of the family. And they all travel there. And they stay for the week. Now, normally, Joseph would have been the head of the family. But with his demise, Jesus, as the older brother, is the new head of the family. And so they're planning on going. A discussion arises where Jesus indicates, you know what, you guys go ahead. I'm not going. I'm not ready to go yet. And that led to this particular conflict that we're about to read about. Why don't you leave here and go up to the feast so your disciples can get a good look at the works you do? No one who intends to be publicly known does everything behind the scenes. If you're serious about what you're doing, come out in the open and show the world. His brothers were pushing him like this because they didn't believe in him either. Okay? So they're saying, you know what? You're not going, you should go. If you're so high and mighty, if you want everybody to know you're the Messiah to show everybody these miracles, you need to go. I mean, why are you doing these miracles in these backwater towns? You need to go to the capital. Go to Washington, D.C. Go to Jerusalem and make your case. And everybody's going to believe you. And they said it in a derisive fashion. They were kind of mocking him. I talked about some reasons why they might have been uncomfortable or unhappy with their brother. It's highly likely that they were aware that in Jerusalem, the religious leaders had put out a death sentence on Jesus, that they made it clear that they were trying to kill him. And so he wants him to go anyway. So it's pretty malicious to suggest that he go somewhere where people want to kill him. Now, why would they be so upset? Well, I mentioned some of the things earlier, but another reason is Jesus, as he's coming out publicly and saying that he is the Son of God, that God's his father, not Joseph. Now, think about what the implications are. For people who know the family, and he's saying, Joseph isn't my father, God is. Now, the Jews, there was already controversy regarding Mary. The Jewish religious leaders were convinced that she had some type of affair, and that's where Jesus comes from. And so Jesus saying, God is my father, they're like winking at each other going, yeah, right, yeah, we know about your father, okay? And so by coming out publicly and saying this, then the controversy about Mary's purity is brought to the forefront all over again. I imagine that when they were younger, they heard this from their friends, from other adults, about Jesus' parentage, and so the idea was, hey, yeah, we know about your mom. Okay, yeah, your mom she's not as holy as everybody thinks, right? And so when Mary's talking to other family members about the angel's visit, she probably had a reputation in the family of having a screw loose. And so this just brings that up again. And so the family is being dishonored by Jesus making this claim that Joseph isn't his father, that in fact God is his father. So Jesus' brothers have some reasons for not being terribly happy with him, especially if they don't believe the story that God is his father. By coming out publicly, you are saying that my mom is unchaste, so shut your mouth, Jesus. So going back to a potential scenario as to what started this fight. The family's already got reservations at the Jerusalem Hilton, okay? They're ready to go, they pack their food, and Jesus announces, I'm not going with you guys. I'm not ready. And so they're thinking, first thing they're probably thinking is, wait, so the whole family has to stay behind because you, the head of the family, suddenly decides you're not ready? So that may have contributed to this particular problem, okay? We got 10 reservations, man, and you ain't ready? So Jesus responds this way. He says, Jesus came back at them, don't crowd me. This isn't my time. It's your time. It's always your time. You have nothing to lose. The world has nothing against you, but it's up in arms against me. It's against me because I expose the evil behind its pretension. You go ahead. Go up to the feast. Don't wait for me. I'm not ready. It's not the right time for me. So Jesus says, look, I'm not stopping you. You can go. Don't wait for me. Okay? Now, there might have been a couple reasons why Jesus didn't want to go with them. One, because of what he just said, he's not ready. But the other possibility is this. He knows that when he goes, big things are going to happen. He's going to draw some attention, and some of that attention is going to be very negative. If he's there officially as the head of his family, then that puts his family at risk. Because now, what he is saying is being represented as what goes for the whole family. And for those that are seeking to kill him, that could potentially result in some negative repercussions for his family. Well, notice that you never see Jesus doing ministry with family members. He never did that. And again, one possible reason for that is A, that his brothers didn't believe him, okay? But the other thing is that he was protecting them. Ultimately, after the resurrection, 2 of his brothers became leaders in the church, by the way, okay? After the resurrection, right? So he may have been protecting them. There was division within Jesus' family, okay? His brothers, his 4 brothers, and at least 2 sisters didn't believe in him, didn't believe the story, clearly didn't believe the story that God was his father. But some of the cousins did. James and John's mother, Mary Salome, was the sister of Mary. So they were his first cousins. So they believed. It's also been suggested that some of the other disciples were also related to him. And so, again, in the family of Jesus, there were some who believed wholeheartedly and others who didn't believe at all. And this contributed to family conflict, I'm sure. All right, verse 9. He said this and stayed on in Galilee. But later, after his family had gone up to the feast, he also went. But he kept out of the way, careful not to draw attention to himself. The Jews were already out looking for him, asking around, where is that man? So they didn't have wanted posters back in those days. He didn't have pictures, so they knew him only by the description. And you can't say, oh, he's this young bearded guy. Yeah, with long hair. Yeah, that probably was slightly common, and so that wouldn't have been very helpful. So nobody knew exactly what he looked like, especially for those people who've never seen him before. Okay? There was a lot of contentious talk about him circulating through the crowds. Some were saying, he's a good man. But others said, not so, he's selling snake oil. This kind of talk went on in guarded whispers because of the intimidating Jewish leaders. So Jesus is walking around, got his sunglasses on, incognito, checking out what people are saying about him. I presume John was there too, because How else would we have known that he was walking around incognito? I'm just saying. Jesus could have told him, but I imagine Jesus and John, maybe James, maybe somebody else was there, but Jesus was there with just a small group, just hanging out, buying food, talking to folks, but hanging low, right? With the feast already half over, Jesus showed up in the temple teaching. So he could take it no more. He's kept his mouth closed long enough. He's listened to what people are saying about him, and now he's got to contribute some things. The Jews were impressed, but puzzled. How does he know so much without being schooled? Now, we saw in Matthew, they were asking this question. Now, here we are in John, where people are wondering the same thing. He hasn't done a miracle yet. He's just teaching. And people are just wondering, how is he so literate? How does he understand the Old Testament so well, not having gone to college? He's not a Pharisee, he's not a Sadducee, he hasn't received formal training, and yet he speaks with authority, he speaks like he knows what he's talking about, and those who've actually read the scriptures can confirm he's quoting right. This is the Weiss version. Okay. Then the Jews began marveling, saying, how is it possible that this man has a knowledge of formal education, not having learned, with the result that he is at present uneducated? How can he be uneducated and say stuff like this? Jesus said, I didn't make this stuff up. What I teach comes from the one who sent me. Anyone who wants to do his will can test this teaching and know whether it's from God or whether I'm making it up. A person making things up tries to make himself look good, but someone trying to honor the one whom sent him sticks to the facts and doesn't tamper with reality. It was Moses, wasn't it, who gave you God's law? But none of you are living it. So why are you trying to kill me? The crowd said, you're crazy. Who's trying to kill you? You're demon-possessed. That's another word of saying you're really crazy, okay? Because crazy and demon-possessed were kind of synonymous back in those days. And so this is where, they were listening and marveling up to the point where he goes, so what are you doing trying to kill me? He was aware of the death sentence hanging over his head. He was well aware of the risk he was taking by speaking out loud. So now, what he wants to do is to address the death sentence that's hanging over his head. And instead of pleading with the Pharisees and Sadducees, the religious leaders who took the warrant out on him, he addresses the people and says, you know what, let me ask you, do you think this is fair that they want to kill me? This is what happened. So he says, Jesus said, I did one miraculous thing a few months ago, and you're still standing around getting all upset, wondering what I'm up to. And what he was referring to was when he healed some person on the Sabbath. And that's what started this big mess. So then Jesus says, let me explain to you why giving me a death sentence for healing on the Sabbath is illogical. He says, Moses prescribed circumcision. Originally, it came not from Moses, but from his ancestors. And so, you circumcise a man dealing with one part of his body, even if it's on the Sabbath. Now, as you probably know, in Jewish law, circumcision takes place 8 days after the baby boy is born. Now, why 8 days? You need there to be adequate production of vitamin K by the liver, and when vitamin K peaks at 8 days, now you can do the circumcision and not have to worry about the kid bleeding. Okay? That's now it doesn't say that in the Bible. We know that now, but that's in the Mosaic law. Got to wait 8 days. And so the religious leaders would follow the law to the T, and if it occurred on the Sabbath, they would go ahead and circumcise the kid. It didn't matter that it was the Sabbath. So Jesus says, so why are you upset with me because I made a man's body well on the Sabbath? Don't be nitpickers. Use your head and heart to discern what is right, to test what is authentically right. Saying, look, you do work on the Sabbath, right? I mean, surgery, if a surgeon cuts somebody on the Sabbath, isn't that violating the Sabbath? But you're doing it for a good reason. Answered Jesus and said to them, this is Weiss, one work I did, and all of you are marveling. On this account, Moses has given you circumcision, not because it is from Moses as the source, but from the fathers. And yet, on a Sabbath, you circumcise a man. Since a man receives circumcision on a Sabbath in order that the law of Moses might not be broken, are you filled with bitter spleen against me because I made a man completely sound on the Sabbath? Stop judging according to external appearance, but be judging the just judgment. So Jesus makes a little point here. He's saying, look, okay, if you consider circumcising a child on the Sabbath, you think about it, it's work. Okay, so you take a body part away on the Sabbath to satisfy the Mosaic law. What did I do? I made a man whole on the Sabbath. So you took a piece away, I added something. I healed the guy. Okay? So if what you do is okay, why isn't what I do okay? That's when some of the people of Jerusalem said, isn't this the one they were out to kill? So people, when they said, who's trying to kill you? You got a demon. Well, people knew that, all right, there was probably the Pharisees who were saying that, like, oh, we didn't say that. What are you talking about, trying to kill you? Where'd you get that? But there are other people there that realize, and they ask them the question, isn't this the guy that they said to look out for, that there was a death sentence on his head? That if he showed his face here, we'd show him. And here he is. Here he is out in the open saying whatever he pleases, and no one's stopping him. Could it be that the rulers know that he, in fact, is the Messiah? Maybe he is the guy, because they said all that stuff. They told everybody to be on the lookout for him and what they were going to do. And here he is, and nobody's doing nothing. Some others, when they said, could this be the guy? Some would say, and yet we know where this man came from. The Messiah is going to come out of nowhere. Nobody's going to know where he comes from. Okay, they couldn't get over the fact that Jesus came from a family, Mary and his brothers and everything. The idea was, they expected the Messiah to come down out of heaven. They didn't expect him to be born into a Jewish family. And so this isn't what they expected from their Messiah. And so this was the comeback. It's like, he's doing miracles and he's talking like he knows what he's talking about and everything, but he came from a family. He was born. He's a human. How can that be the Messiah? How can that be God in the flesh? That provoked Jesus, who was teaching in the temple, to cry out, yes, you think you know me and where I'm from, but that's not where I'm from. I didn't set myself up in business. My true origin is in the one who sent me, and you don't know him at all. I come from him. That's how I know him. He sent me here. They were looking for a way to arrest him, but not a hand was laid on him because it wasn't yet God's time. Many from the crowd committed themselves in faith to him, saying, will the Messiah, when he comes, provide better and more convincing evidence than this? So some people were going, you know what? If the Messiah shows up, what more can he do? This person is healing everybody that comes to him. He's speaking like a Bible scholar, all right? He seems to be a good guy. When arguing with the Pharisees, he's shooting them down. They're not even, what he says makes sense, and they're not even brave enough to arrest him after all their huffing and puffing. So maybe this guy maybe he's the one. What more could we expect from the Messiah? The Pharisees, alarmed at this seditious undertow going through the crowd, teamed up with the high priest and sent their police to arrest him. So I said, you know what? Enough of this. They're asking why we're not arresting him. We need to get on the ball and go get this guy. Get the police here now. He needs to go to jail now, today, before this gets any worse. We need to answer them. They're asking why we're not arresting him. We need to take action and go arrest that guy. Jesus rebuffed them. So, police are coming. Come with us, sir. Blah, blah, blah. Okay? And Jesus rebuffed them. I am with you. I am with you only a short time. Then I go to the one who sent me. You will look for me, but you won't find me. Where I am, you can't come. The Jews put their heads together. Where do you think he's going? That we won't be able to find him? Do you think he's about to travel to the Greek world to teach the Jews? What's he talking about anyway? You will look for me, but you won't find me. And where I am, you can't come. So most of us understand what he's talking about there. And unfortunately, we're going to have to pick up there next time. This is a cliffhanger. I understand that. This is where I ended in the class last Sunday. And we'll be picking up the end of this in the future. Next Sunday. So anyway, it's kind of a bad place to stop because we've got a cliffhanger here. What's going to happen next? Now, don't cheat and read the Bible and see what the end is. Wait until I cover it. No, you can cheat if you want. That's fine with me. Okay. All right, but we will pick up on part 2 of John chapter 7 when we return on our next installment. Thanks for watching.